Hello, everyone. Today I've got two stories, and the two posts relate. You'll hear about Opie's ex-wife and how she basically tries to ruin him. Now listen, guys. The episode is a pretty long one, and the stories are really good. So make sure you got some time because it's pretty wild. I hope you stay for the story today, and do hit that subscribe button for future stories. This first story is titled, My Ex-Wife Learned the Hard Way Not to Ignore a Court Summons. A bit of background. I was married to a woman for 15 years and ended up divorcing her because she liked to sleep with other guys while it took me 6 years to stumble on this fact. I owe it to her being either a sociopath or a narcissist. She could absolutely turn on and off the charm and could come up with lies staring you right in the eyes. Hindsight is 2020. Let's call her V short for Voldemort. As one time when I was talking about her after the separation, I referred to her as she who must not be named, and the nickname stuck with all of my friends and family during the marriage. My ex and I were best friends with another couple, and for this post, we'll call them Sam and Marie. Sam was and still is my best friend. Marie was V's best friend. Maria had found out about V's plans to cheat on me prior to me finding out and told me that she couldn't condone infidelity and their friendship would end if V did cheat on me. And no, Marie did not tell me, and I don't blame her for not doing so. When I finally found out that V was having a Facebook affair with some dude in California, it was just 2 weeks before V was flying him out and putting him up in the hotel for 3 days. I spent those 2 weeks getting a lawyer, a private investigator, and my exit strategy together. I left her the weekend after their hotel stay. She would spend the days with him and come home for the afternoon and evening without a shred of guilt showing interactions. The private investigator having gotten pictures and video of them leaving the hotel and eating lunch together and then heading back to the hotel. I first dated Salman Marie's in their in-law basement apartment, eventually moving to a small apartment back in town where V lived. Fast forward 9 months and I'm divorced from V. We had one daughter, and I'll call her Rebecca. She was 13 at the time, who was still at home, and we were trying shared custody and lived about a quarter-mile apart. There are 2 kids from the marriage, but they were living apart from us at the time, and they don't play a part in this whole story. We had acquired a lake house during the marriage and had listed it to sell, and we had it written into the divorce agreement to split the proceeds. But paying half the mortgage on that and the rent on my apartment was really stretching me thin financially. One day, Marie emails me a subject line in all caps saying V just tried to get me fired. Long story short, we emailed Marie's boss claiming that Marie was gossiping about V on sales calls to customers, but her boss knew it was BS and told V as much wisely. Marie didn't mess around waiting to see what was next. She went to the local courthouse that day and filed for an anti-harassment order against V. It took several visits to the judge as we chose to ignore multiple court summons so that the judge could hear her side of the story. Eventually, the judge granted the order because V never showed up to court during this time. V called 911 on me multiple times, one time claiming I put a letter bomb in her mailbox and the 2 other times that I had entered her apartment without her permission. The letter bomb accusation was due to me posting a link to Ship Your Enemy's glitter scam on Facebook a few months before and subsequently mailing her a thick bundle of forms to sign. The police were called, and I had to go to Versa's apartment and open the letter in front of the police. Needless to say, there was no glitter, let alone a glitter bomb. The 2 times I'd gone into her apartment had both been to drop off Rebecca's book bag when she'd forgotten it at my apartment. Both times I had texts from V granting me permission to open the door and to put the book bag inside. She would then text me after I had done so, trying to revoke permission, telling me that I shouldn't have gone into her apartment and that she never gave me permission. To this day, I think V thinks that if she deletes messages on her end, the message is deleted on my end, even though kids will be kids. And Rebecca did forget her book back at my place on at least one other occasion. I didn't fall for V's ruse. A third time, all forgotten book bags were delivered by Rebecca, and I meeting halfway between the apartments. Also included with the multiple 911 calls were multiple child wellness checks on evenings, when I had Rebecca at my apartment. It's so fun to explain to your child why the police are showing up at 8 at night to check to see if she's okay. Basically, V was trying to rile me up, boil my blood, so it looks like I'm the bad guy throughout this whole mess. 7. Marie have been lifesavers to me and Rebecca, hosting and cooking weekly family dinners for us, and just being absolutely rock steady in their support and tolerance of the situation. Around this time, we had filed for sole custody at the strong urging of my lawyer. I insisted on a guardian ad litem to be appointed to represent Rebecca's best interests. Her being a minor child, of course, the parents must pay the fees of the guardian ad litem. At this point, my finances are really getting worrisome. So I write an email to V saying we need to drop the price of the lake house and get that sold regardless of profit. I needed that off my back so I could continue to live where I could co-parent Rebecca as well as fight the custody battle. So there I am, going deeper into debt, can't pay the rent and mortgage long term. And V is starting another court battle for full custody with no other choice. I move back in with Sam and Marie so I can continue to pay my lawyer and keep fighting. About a week after I'm settled back with Sam and Marie, I hear from Rebecca that V's glass patio table was smashed the previous night. I was in New Hampshire that evening with witnesses, so it couldn't have been me. I was paying for Rebecca's cell phone and we have Life 360, so we could know where each other was at any time. Plus, it had history, so I could at least prove that my phone was in New Hampshire. Rebecca says she knows I was there and tells me that she'll tell her mother that it wasn't me. The next day, I was served with a restraining order, claiming that I had vandalized these patio furniture and that she still felt afraid due to the letter bomb incident. The restraining order was for 10 days, and then I could show up in court and contest it. Being continued, the officer who served the restraining order explained that he had to confiscate any firearms and licenses. While I did have a recently acquired Class A concealed carry license, I hadn't had any firearms other than a big gun of Rebecca's. The officer left with just the class license, smiling as he said he was pretty sure I wasn't going to go on a rampage with a BB gun. The first thing I did the next day was go to the police station and request all incident reports that had involved me since I left her. I knew of 7 incidents, but the desk sergeant informed me that they had 19 incident reports from VE. He talked to me about clearly trying to get a feel for what kind of person I was and just what was going on. We parted company with him, assuring me that the patrol officers would now know what's going on and the police department would do right by me so long as I kept my cool. Fair enough. So 2 nights before the court appearance to contest the restraining order, Sam, Marie, and I are sitting on their porch drinking some beer and brainstorming about what I'm going to say to the judge. I'm a bit discouraged because I know it's going to be a he said, she said situation, and I'm living in Massachusetts where if your chromosomes don't match, you are a second-class citizen when it comes to parental rights. Plus, V deserves an Oscar for how well she plays the victim. It wasn't looking good. Marie suddenly said, "Hey, let me see that restraining order." I handed it to her, and she says, "Hey, this is my judge. She's the judge that granted me the anti-harassment order against me." You're kidding. Sam and I looked at each other in amazement. Marie says, "I swear it is. Let me go get it." Marie goes back inside and comes back a few minutes later with her court order. And sure enough, it's the same judge. My grin felt like it was going to split my lips. Now I knew exactly what to do. Now for the meat of the story. The court date to contest the restraining order arrived, and I'm there first thing. Just me. No lawyer, because he had to appear in court elsewhere. I strongly hoped that we wouldn't show up, but she did, with someone other than her divorce lawyer. And before court was in session, her new lawyer approached me and offered to let the no contact order lapse, but wanted a do not abuse order left in place. I politely declined the offer, stating that I had done nothing to warrant either order, and that I wanted the judge to hear my argument. These lawyer was taken aback by this a bit, and then shrugged as if to say, "It's your funeral," and then walked back to her view was sitting. We went in front of the judge and we told her side of the story, and I started telling mine, introducing all the incident reports from the police department, but Vienna's her lawyer didn't have copies of all of them. So the judge sent us back to the gallery to await a second call while V and her lawyer reviewed the reports. When we were called back, the judge started to go into the content of the police reports, and I stated that the content was almost irrelevant, but she insisted on going through them. During that, we emphasized 2 incidents where I briefly entered V's apartments with her permission, but she characterized them as me doing so without her permission. I said that if necessary, I would be able to provide communications where she gave me permission when going through the first place, apart from the night. We also tried to characterize me as having a multiple personality disorder, as told to her by our shared primary care physician. The judge, after his doctor told you this without his permission, she replied, "Yes, Your Honor." The judge looked at me, puzzled. I shrugged and said, "Well," slowly shaking my head in disbelief that I have a very close relationship with my doctor, and I highly doubt that he would violate HIPAA. The judge didn't look fazed, but I think she got the message that she wasn't being entirely truthful, as that was the last police report to go. I reminded her that my point wasn't the contents, but I thought V was using the courts to harass and intimidate me to make me look bad to the guardian ad litem. And I brought up that this isn't out of character for me, as she has an anti-harassment order in place against her. Put there by you, Your Honor. The judge blinked at that bit of info. I gave her the details and reminded her that V declined to show up at multiple hearings, as I recounted the particulars of Marie's story. The judge squinted her eyes more and more, and her frown got deeper and deeper. She turned to V, and her voice was slow, cold fury, and she says, "Do you have an anti-harassment placed against you?" V's voice was so small and weak, and she said, "Yes, Your Honor." I so wanted to look at V's face to see her reaction, but I kept my eyes locked on the judge. The judge pointed at V and said, "Why didn't you show up to the hearings?" A pause as we struggled to find some excuse, and she said, "Because I didn't want to." But the judge waved her to silence. I think that was the turning point, as I think she was going to grant the request for that. Do not abuse. But she turned to me and said sternly, "I think there is a bit of this going on both sides, but clearly she wants you to stay out of our apartment." I told her, "Never again, Your Honor." The restraining order was terminated with a bang of her gavel, and we were done because the restraining order was terminated. Legally, it meant it never happened. I got my class a concealed carry license back the next day and ultimately won the custody battle. A large part of which was the termination of the restraining order, guys. That was the first story posted by Opie and his wife. Definitely sounds like a stand-up human being, a really great person. Because the second story also relates to his ex-wife and is titled "Ex-Wife Tries to Frame Me for Theft and She Fails." Background at this point in the saga, having lost a custody battle, is moving to New Hampshire to be with her then primary lover, now husband number 5. A detail that amuses me to this day is that he shares the same first name as the Facebook lover from California. As mentioned in my first post, I always refer to them as Paul number 1 and Paul number 2 when talking about them, and yes, I'm easily amused. About a month after the custody hearing in which I got full custody of Rebecca, and I had an email exchange in which we agreed that I would go to her apartment and take Rebecca's captain's bed and some of Rebecca's belongings. That day, the movers arrived to pick up Voldemort's stuff. She was moving 75 miles away to central New Hampshire, having burned pretty much every bridge in the area. As Sam drives a truck, he graciously agreed to come along to both help and to be a witness. So we get there around 7:20 p.m. and knock at the door. After a brief wait, we opens that are her iPhone glued to her ear. She sullenly mumbles something about her stuffs upstairs and then heads off to her second-floor bedroom, weaving in, mumbling something that made me stop and think. I didn't quite get it, but I recall thinking, I really can't go in here without a witness. So I stick my head out the door and said, "Sam, come on, you need to come in here with me." So we go in and, holy crap, it's a junkyard. It's not quite filthy, but it's beyond cluttered. By now, V has disappeared into our room, completely slamming the door. So it takes me a bit of wandering to find Rebecca's room. It's not that she's in the middle of packing, but there's crap everywhere. There's dust, cobwebs trucked in dirt, unwashed dishes, empty bottles of wine, dry dog food. You get the idea. So Sam and I start gathering up Rebecca's stuff and take some stuff out to the car. I realize that we need an Allen wrench to take apart the bed, so I go out to the car to get one and come back in. In the lull in activity, she had come back into the living area, but went right back into her bedroom as we climbed the stairs. The phone still glued to her ear. It takes a bit, but we finally get the bed taken apart and have moved most of the stuff in Rebecca's room out to the front lawn without conferring. It's clear that Sam and I decided to get the stuff to the front lawn and worry about packing the vehicles after we're completely out of the house. It's at this point that it starts to get weird. Sam is carrying out the second to last load when she pops her head out of the bedroom door, looks out from the balcony and says, "Why are you taking stuff out of my house?" Sam drops what he's carrying and exits the house. He knew what was up instantly. I come out of Rebecca's room and V clearly didn't realize that I was still there and say you agreed via email that we would take Rebecca's bed tonight. She looks startled and says, "Is that Rebecca's stuff?" "Of course it is. You said her stuff was in her room." I take what I'm carrying and go outside. And Sam says, "Dude, that's not right. I have a bad feeling about this. We need to call the police." I said, "You're absolutely right." I could tell that Sam was expecting me to object, and he does a double take when he realized that he wasn't going to have to convince me. I called the police and said, "Hi, my name's Jack Crow, and I live at 321 Main Street here in Crossville while I'm talking to the police on the phone." I'm aware of V coming to the door and opening it and becoming quite agitated as she realizes that I'm talking to the police. By the time I finish the following explanation, she slammed the door and is tromping around inside the living area, heatedly talking on her phone. I said, "I'm at my ex-wife's apartment getting some of my daughter's belongings, as we agreed via email. And while I'm getting the last of the stuff out of the house, my ex-wife demanded, 'Why are you taking stuff out of my house?' So in order to protect all parties, I'm asking that a police officer come by to verify with Miss Crow that she agreed to this and that she's fine with what we've removed from the house." They told me an officer was on the way. As I'm waiting for the officer to arrive, leaning nonchalantly against the front of Sam's truck. Sam standing right there next to me, just shaking his head and says, "I'm going to call Mary and let her know what's going on right about here." V throws open the front door, muttering something about not having gotten all of Rebecca's stuff, and proceeds to deposit another laundry basket piled high with clothes and other items on the front stoop and disappears back inside. I start to whistle. Pop goes the weasel. Most of the stuff we've moved is sitting on the front lawn and we leave it there. After about 5 minutes, the officer arrives. He steps out of the patrol SUV and I slowly approach him, arm extended to shake his hand. Good evening, officer. I'm Jack Crow. Good evening, Mr. Crow. Allie Johnson. We shake hands. I give him a brief explanation of the situation and he comments that I was right to call him and that he'll go speak to me. He's up there for about 2 minutes and then he comes back down and says, "You guys are good to go." We briefly chat with him, apologize for having to get him involved, and he replies, "No, you did the right thing. I liked him a lot." After that, we start loading the rest of our stuff, and he asked how much more is in the house. I told him nothing. It's all out here except that laundry basket on the stoop that Mrs. Crow brought out while we were waiting for you. He replied, "Oh, good, I can't sit here all night. If you guys are good to go, I'll take off." And then he says, "Wait, what's that?" "What's what?" He told me he thinks he saw a phone in that basket. He shines his flashlight on the laundry basket on the front stoop. I walk up to the basket. It's an iPhone sitting on top of it. I pick it up and it looks like Rebecca's old iPhone 4. I told him that it's just my daughter's old phone, and I'll take it with us. I carry the basket down to my car and put it in the back seat, just as I'm walking away. It rings. It's an incoming call from V's landline. I realize it's this phone. I pick it up and answer it. "Hello," click. I look at the front and there's a text from her boyfriend on the lock screen asking, "Is he gone yet?" Yep, it's her phone. I waved down the officer and said, "Wait, officer, I was wrong. It's Miss Crow's phone. Can you please return it to her?" He takes it from me and returns it to V at the front door and walks back down to us. "Okay, you're still good to go. I'm going to go now." I told him if you could please swing by again in 15 to 20 minutes. If we're still here, you might want to pull in and make sure we're still okay. Not 5 minutes after he pulls out, and while we're still loading stuff, V again pops out the front door, phone glued to her ear, and says, "Is the officer still here?" I told her no, and she says, "Get him back." Why? I want him back. Get him, and goes back inside. I'm briefly tempted to tell her, if you want the cop back, you call for him, but that little voice in my head says, you call. So I redial Roseville Finest and request that Officer Johnson return to the address again. Sam and I assume our waiting positions at the front of the truck. A few minutes later, Officer Johnson arrives. He grins at me and I tell him she just came out the front door after you left, asking for police to be called. And he goes up to see what she wants. He goes up there and V hands him her phone. He talks for a few more minutes, hangs up the phone, continues speaking with V for 20 more seconds and then returns to us. I look at him quizzically and he says, "No worries guys, you're still good to go, but I'm going to stay until you're done here." I continue to give him the raised eyebrow and the officer told me she wanted to accuse you of trying to steal her phone. But I pointed out to her that I was the one that noticed it in the basket and you hadn't touched it yet, and that you were the one to ask me to return it to her. Just finish up, guys. We all want to get home where it's warm. We finished up and we all shook hands and got out of there because what an absolutely crazy post made by OP. He's been through a lot and dodged so many shots fired at him by this lovely woman and made it out unscathed. And I wonder why she's on her 5th husband, because she sounds like a real stand-up gal that you definitely love to have in your life. And that's it for this episode of our /ProRevenge. If you like the video, hit that subscribe button. It really helps my channel.